Tonight, you'll hear a story that no one else saw coming. A body pulled from the Thames with a rope tied in a sailor's knot lost to history. Before we dive into the mystery, make sure to subscribe to The Silent Case and hit that like button. The tide was low when they called me in, though the river still whispered like something alive, shifting under the pale London moon. I remember the smell rising first, that metallic sting of cold water mixed with rot and rope fibers soaked in decades of secrets. The body floated against the embankment wall, turning slowly, as if it wanted me to see every angle of its silent accusation. And there, around the wrists and ankles, was the rope. Not new, not recent, but frayed, salt-burned, threaded with tar. Rope from an era long swallowed by the river and tied in a knot no modern sailor would know how to make. I knew, even before they hauled the body onto the concrete, that this wasn't an ordinary killing. It was an invitation, a taunt, something ancient reaching up from the depths, tapping me on the shoulder. I am Detective Silas Dune, and this is the story London tried its best to forget. But the river never forgets. The victim's face was swollen from the water, but I caught details the others missed. A ring, old, engraved with a crest half scratched away. A tattoo of a swallow on the wrist, faded but still visible through the bruising. And when I leaned close enough, I smelled it, the faint scent of oak and pitch, the same scent old ships carried in their bones. I crouched beside the body. The knot around the wrists was called a dead man's embrace, a knot banned from British ships after the sinking of the Morning Dirk in 1887, a shipwreck that cost 22 men their lives and left only one survivor. A survivor who vanished into obscurity before authorities could question him. The Thames chilled the back of my throat as I stood. Something about this killing wasn't new, it was inherited. By the time the victim was identified, a man named Peter Wycliffe, the night had folded into that hour when the city feels hollow, like it's inhaling before dawn. Wycliffe's family, I soon learned, traced back to one of the Morning Dirk's crew. A crew accused in dusty, half-buried records of mutiny, drunken negligence, and abandoning their own men during the storm that cracked the ship's hull like brittle bone. I didn't believe in coincidence, and the river wasn't done. The next morning, a second body surfaced near Wapping. Same rope, same knot, same cold ritual. This time it was a woman, a genealogist ironically, whose great-grandfather had served aboard that same ill-fated ship. A pattern formed faster than anyone expected, except perhaps the killer. He wasn't hiding his work, he wanted it found, wanted the right eyes on it. Each crime scene twisted deeper into the city's maritime past, old docks long abandoned, warehouses sealed shut since before my parents were born, pubs where captains once whispered over rum, now ghosted by peeling paint and silence. And at each location I found something left behind, a token from the Morning Dirk, a brass button, a broken compass, a page from the ship's log, torn precisely along the spine. These weren't clues. These were memories being forced back into the world. My colleagues chased smaller leads, jealous spouses, financial motives, the usual surface-level comforts. But I could feel a different pulse beneath everything, something slow, patient, generational. Revenge that hadn't cooled in over a century. One night as rain smeared the city into streaks of silver and black, I visited the Maritime Archive. The building creaked under its own age. Dust floated in the air, glittering like drowned ash. The archivist brought me a file box labeled Morning Dirk, 1887. When I opened it, the stale scent of old seawater hit me like a memory that wasn't mine. Inside the box was the final entry of the ship's log, written in a shaking hand. They've sealed the lower deck. They think no one will know. The sea will swallow the truth, but I will not forget. Not I, not my blood after me. The ink cut off there, no signature. But the archivist told me something interesting. The last known survivor of the Morning Dirk was a boy. 15 years old. Name, Elias Calder. His line faded from records soon after. Calder. The name rattled something in my mind, a cold suspicion, because I knew that name. Everyone did in certain circles. A man named Rowan Calder had recently been petitioning the city for access to dive the wreck of the Morning Dirk. He claimed it was for historical preservation, but he was denied, repeatedly. Funding issues, safety concerns, bureaucratic walls. The city had no interest in dredging up more ghosts from the Thames bed. But Rowan Calder had been persistent. Too persistent. When I finally found him, it was by the docks, naturally. The water lapped against the pilings, dark and thick, carrying the smell of diesel and tide. Calder stood alone at the edge, hat pulled low, rain beading on his coat. He didn't turn when I approached, didn't speak until I stood beside him. "You've seen the bodies," he said softly. His voice was calm, too calm. "You tied them with rope no one's used in a century," I answered. He smiled, just a small, sad twist of the mouth. "Not no one." I studied him. The lines on his face weren't the lines of a killer. They were the lines of a man carrying a weight handed to him at birth. "Why now?" I asked. "Because no one else would," he whispered. "My family waited for justice, but justice drowned before the ship did." Lightning cracked over the river, illuminating his eyes. They weren't angry. They were exhausted. He told me the story then, how the crew of the Morning Dirk forced the lower deck sailors, mostly boys and immigrants, into a storage hold during the storm, hoping to lighten the ship and save themselves. How they sealed the hatch, how they listened to the pounding fists and screams until the sea claimed everything. The official report blamed the storm, but Calder's ancestor, the 15-year-old, escaped through a broken grate. He watched the crew abandon the trapped men, watched them save themselves and lie about it afterward. His family spent generations trying to bring the truth forward, but evidence rotted, witnesses died. History smoothed the edges like it always does. "So you killed their blood?" I asked. Calder shook his head. "No, I didn't kill anyone." The rain hesitated then, as if the city itself leaned closer. "What do you mean?" I pressed, hand drifting toward the grip of my holster. Calder finally looked at me, and that was when I saw it, real fear. "I only marked them," he said. "I only tied the rope, I only brought them to the river, I never killed them. Something else did." His voice trembled. "It took them before I could even finish." A chill spidered down my spine. "Something dragged them," he whispered, "from my hands into the water. Something still loyal to the dead." I stepped back. "Calder, you expect me to believe?" But he wasn't looking at me anymore. His eyes were locked on the river, on a shape rising slowly to the surface, a ripple, then a bulge, then something like a hand, pale, bloated, pressing up from beneath before sinking again. The Thames closed its mouth. Calder fell to his knees. "They won't stop," he murmured, "because the truth isn't done. I should have arrested him. I should have called for backup. But something about the river that night held my voice down like a hand on my throat." 3 days later, Calder disappeared. His hat was found on the dock, his coat too, and a length of rope, old, tarred, identical to the others, trailing into the water. They never found his body. I filed the report. I answered the questions. I played the part of the detective who followed the evidence and reached a logical conclusion. Officially, the case was closed as a chain of murders followed by suicide. The public moved on. London kept breathing. But every time I walk by the Thames, I look at the water, at the surface that shifts like a slow exhale, at the shadows beneath that move against the tide. Some nights when the fog rolls in thick, I swear I see ropes drifting just below the surface, knots forming where no hands remain to tie them. Maybe Calder lied. Maybe he told the truth. Maybe the dead of the Morning Dirk finally learned how to reach upward. All I know is this: no one else knew what happened, no one else noticed the pattern, and no one else hears the river whisper the names of the forgotten. If you enjoyed this story, let us know your favorite part in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to The Silent Case so you never miss a secret the world doesn't know.